Hello, welcome to this YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to see why Africa was called or is still called the Dark Continent. Welcome. Centuries ago, the term Dark Continent was popularized by European explorers to describe Africa, framing it as an earth mystery. This label, coined by Welsh journalist and explorer Sir Henry Morton Stanley, served as a marketing tactics of his books detailing his journey through the continent. However, this characterization obscured the rich histories, culture, and civilizations that had existed long before European contact. Historians urge that the notion of Africa as unknown to Europeans prior to the 19th century was a fallacy, deliberately constructed to justify colonialism and perpetuate racism against Africans. Long before European exploitations, Africa had established extensive trade network with Middle Eastern and Asian nations for over 2 millennia. As a result, Europeans had indirect knowledge of Africa and had begun to include it on their maps, albeit with inaccuracies. During the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries, European explorers, fueled by curiosity and ambition, sought to fill in the gaps of the maps. Explorers like Stanley and David Livingstone embarked on journeys to chart the continent, often using a narrative that emphasized the savagery of its people. Ironically, Stanley admitted to having read over 130 books on Africa before setting out his explorations. Yet, his accounts often ignored the continent's civilization. European exploration was intertwined with the colonization of Africa. As explorers uncovered the continent's wealth of resources, both human and natural, their desire to exploit these resources intensified. This led to a widespread belief that Africa were in need of European civilization. This led to a widespread belief that Africans were in need of European civilization, effectively fostering what would become known as a white savior complex. By portraying Africa as a land filled with savage tribes and disease, European explorers and colonizers obscured the impressive achievement of ancient African empires and the progressive technologies developed by Africans. This historical and cultural erasure became a potent tool for justifying colonial conquest. Under the guise of civilization and humanitarianism, the British employed pretentious anti-slavery campaigns to invade parts of Africa. Despite having profited from the slave trade for centuries, the abolition of the slave trade in the Britain, largely led by black British activists, was weaponized to depict Africans as barbaric and inhuman. This narrative was further fueled by the arrival of Christian missionaries, who often demonized African religions and cultures, perpetuating harmful stereotypes. As a result, many Africans today view Christianity as a white man's religion, further complicating the legacy of European intervention on the continent. While Europeans claimed to bring enlightenment to the dark continent, their actions darkened Africa with decades of oppression, exploitation, and trauma that continue to affect the continent up to now. In contemporary discourse, Africa is still portrayed. In contemporary discourse, Africa is still portrayed as the dark continent by Western media. This persistent misrepresentation underscores the need of outsiders to to challenge long-held misconceptions and explore the truth about Africa's rich history and diversity. For those who call the continent home, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, it's vital to unearth the historical truths that have been buried by European oppressors. There is an urgent need to amplify the narrative of Africa's past, utilizing art, music, film, and literature to reshape perceptions. Fortunately, many historians, scholars, and artists have begun to this important work. In the early 1960s, as several African nations gained independence, a collective of African scholars compiled the General History of Africa, a UNESCO-backed project that spanned topics from prehistory to contemporary issues. This effort aimed to reclaim African narrative and provide a more accurate portrayal of the continent's history. Despite these advances, much work remains. African academia is still largely shaped by Western curricula, which can obscure indigenous knowledge and perspective. It is crucial for African nations to develop educational systems that teach untainted African history. Understanding the brilliance of Africa's past is vital for inspiring confidence and empowering future generations. The label of Dark Continent reflects a complex history of exploration, exploitation, and misunderstanding. It is a term rooted in colonial attitudes that discredited the rich civilization and cultures of Africa. By challenging this misconception and embracing a more nuanced understanding of the continent's history, both Africans and the global community can work towards a future that honors Africa's legacy and potential. The term Dark Continent is there to continuation of the white supremacy. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.